What if a simple act of kindness changed a wedding forever? Discover the incredible story on Graceful Valor Stories. The church was glowing with soft white lights. Every guest had found their place. The flowers were perfect. The pianist had just started playing the processional tune. And then, the whispers began. Don't tell me she actually invited him. The murmurs traveled through the pews like sparks through dry grass. All eyes turned to the man standing awkwardly at the church entrance, thin frame, wrinkled suit, shoes that had clearly seen better decades. The bride's aunt leaned toward another guest. That's the man from the alley, the one who sleeps behind her diner. What is he doing here? From inside the bridal room, Lily heard it all. She peeked through the curtain and saw him, the same man she had quietly helped for years. And now, he was here at her wedding. A lump rose in her throat. She had told no one. She never needed to. It was never about attention. But now, as she stepped into the light and walked past the whispers, gathering the hem of her gown, all that silence was about to speak louder than anything she could have imagined. What happens when 12 Marines crash a wedding to honor a forgotten hero? Stay tuned on Graceful Valor Stories. And then, just as she reached him, before she could even say his name, a convoy of motorcycles and black SUVs pulled up outside the church. 12 men stepped out, 12 uniforms, 12 Marines. Every conversation stopped. Every judgment froze. And Lily realized she hadn't just fed a homeless man. She had sustained a forgotten hero. Lily Harper wasn't famous. She didn't own much, didn't wear designer clothes, and didn't live in the nicest part of town. But what she had, she gave. At 34, she ran a small but beloved roadside diner in a quiet town just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of place with checkered floors, tin-ceiling fans, and booths that creaked when you slid in, the kind of place where you were greeted by name and your coffee cup never got cold. The diner had been her father's dream. After he passed away from a heart attack when Lily was just 22, she took over the place without hesitation. She worked the line herself, wiped down every counter, and hand-lettered every chalkboard menu with the same steady care. Her life was simple, predictable, but never cold. Every morning, Lily opened the diner at 5:30 a.m. sharp. By 6, the first truckers came in. By 7, the teachers, then the older regulars, the ones who ordered the same breakfast every day but stayed for conversation. But it was always after the breakfast rush, right around 9:30, that Lily disappeared for exactly 5 minutes. She'd step out the back door carrying a paper bag with a breakfast sandwich, a cup of black coffee, and sometimes a small note scribbled in Sharpie on a napkin. She never told anyone why. They assumed she was taking a break. But behind the alley, by the rusted dumpster and broken brick wall, sat a man in a tattered gray coat. His beard was untrimmed, his skin weathered, his hands calloused and still. He said nothing. He always waited quietly, like part of the city that time forgot. She never asked his name. He never asked hers. But every day, she left him breakfast, rain or shine, summer or frost, for nearly 6 years. Lily never told her staff, not even her fiancé, Aaron, not because she was hiding it, but because it never felt like something to brag about. It was just something she did. Some days, she left a note. Hope today is kind to you. This one's extra crispy, I remembered. Stay warm out there, okay? The man never replied, never spoke, just nodded, sometimes once, sometimes twice, but every day, he was there. And every day, so was she. To Lily, kindness didn't need a conversation. Inside the diner, the staff liked her but didn't understand her. She's too soft, they'd whisper sometimes. She gives away more than she earns. And maybe they were right. There were days she'd offer free soup to the elderly woman from down the street, days she'd tell a single mom her meal was on the house just because the baby looked tired. But Lily never kept track. To her, people were worth more than receipts. Aaron, her fiancé, was a firefighter, calm, loyal, and solid in all the ways Lily admired. He knew she was generous to a fault, and he loved her for it. The world needs more like you, he often said, even if it doesn't know it yet. And as their wedding approached, Lily made one quiet promise to herself: she would invite everyone who mattered, everyone who had been part of her story, even the ones no one else would think to invite, even the man in the alley, because she believed that just showing up for someone day after day was love in its purest form. She didn't need him to speak. She didn't need to know his past. She only needed to know he existed and that he mattered. How will Lily's secret kindness transform her wedding day? Find out on Graceful Valor Stories. It was a Wednesday morning when Lily's quiet ritual finally stopped being invisible. It started the same as always. She wrapped up the breakfast sandwich, extra egg today, just like he liked, poured a cup of strong black coffee, wiped the lid clean, and slipped a napkin inside with a short note, "Cold wind today. Be safe." Then she stepped out the back door, her sneakers landing on the frosted concrete. The alley was still. The air smelled like damp cardboard and cinnamon. He was there, same spot, same posture. He nodded once, as always, and reached gently for the bag. Lily smiled and turned back inside. But she wasn't alone. One of the new waitresses, barely 19, all lip gloss and loud chewing gum, was standing near the back cooler with her phone out, pretending to text. She didn't say anything right away. But the next day, someone had stuck a yellow post-it on Lily's locker. In big black letters, it read, "Feeding the alley mascot again." Lily peeled it off without a word. By the weekend, the whispers had grown legs. "He's probably not even homeless," someone muttered near the coffee machine. "She's going to get robbed one day. I heard he talks to himself. She only does it because she feels guilty, like she has something to prove." Lily didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. She just adjusted her schedule, started arriving 15 minutes earlier, leaving the food before anyone else showed up. But the silence was no longer safe. The space between her and her co-workers grew colder. Even customers started making comments. One afternoon, as she cleared a booth, she overheard a woman say softly to her husband, "That poor girl thinks she's saving the world with muffins." Lily didn't flinch. She just kept wiping. Her mother noticed the tired look in her eyes. "You give too much of yourself," she told her gently. "People will take until there's nothing left." "I'm not giving anything away," Lily replied, "just sharing what I already have." But deep down, the voices were piling up. She didn't care about being mocked. What hurt was how quickly people turned generosity into weakness, how compassion was called foolish, how kindness was treated like a flaw. Then one morning, as Lily stepped into the alley, she noticed something new. Her scarf, the old wool one she'd left for him the week before, was neatly folded beside the bag, and on the napkin inside the food bag, in shaky but careful penmanship, were 5 words, "Thank you for seeing me." She stared at it for a long time. Those 5 words filled her more than any paycheck, any praise, any social media post ever could. She slipped the note into her wallet, and from that day on, she never missed a morning, not once. When she got engaged to Aaron, some expected her to stop. New life now, her manager said, time to let go of old routines. But Lily wasn't feeding a routine. She was feeding a man, a life, a person the world had decided not to see, and that wasn't something she was willing to outgrow. 3 weeks before her wedding, one of the busboys accidentally spotted her returning from the alley. He didn't say anything at first, but word travels fast in small kitchens. By the end of the day, everyone knew again. "She's still doing it," someone said with a scoff. "She's going to invite him to the wedding, too." A line cook laughed. "Better hope he showers." That night, Lily sat at her kitchen table, staring at the stack of invitation envelopes still waiting to be mailed. She thought about what her guests might say. She thought about the man in the alley wearing a coat with duct tape on the sleeve. And then, she picked up a blank card. On it, she wrote, "To the gentleman behind Harper's Diner, you are warmly invited." There was no address to send it to, so she folded it and slipped it inside the next morning's food bag. She didn't know if he'd come. She didn't expect him to, but she wanted him to know he mattered enough to be asked. The week of the wedding, things got worse. Someone had taken a photo. Lily found out when a regular customer handed her a phone and said, "Is this you?" There it was, a blurry shot of her crouching in the alley, placing the paper bag near the brick wall. The caption underneath, posted by one of the newer servers, when your boss uses company time to feed trash. The post had only a few likes, but the damage was done. She didn't say a word, didn't confront the employee, didn't show the photo to her fiancé or her mother. She just took the morning shift the next day alone and baked in silence. The manager called her into the office. "We appreciate your compassion, Lily," he began, avoiding eye contact, "but some customers are starting to ask questions. They feel uncomfortable." She waited. He fumbled with a stack of receipts. "We'd like to keep a positive image. If you could do this sort of thing on your own time," Lily nodded, calm, polite. But inside, something hardened. That night, she sat in her car outside the diner long after it closed. She watched the alley from across the lot. The man was gone now, his space empty, the bench leaning just slightly like a slouching shoulder. She pulled out her wallet and unfolded the napkin. "Thank you for seeing me." Her breath caught. No one else knew how much she needed to see him, too. 2 days before the wedding, a letter arrived at the reception venue, no return address, no stamp, just a single card inside. The handwriting was deliberate, each letter carved like it cost energy. "Tomorrow I will come, not for cake, but to honor a debt." The wedding planner handed it to Lily, puzzled. "Is this from a relative?" Lily stared at the card for a long time. She didn't speak, didn't explain, but her hands trembled as she slid it into her purse. That night, she stood in the center of the empty church after the final walkthrough. The pews were quiet, the flowers arranged, the aisle freshly swept. She walked slowly to the front, her heels echoing. Then she whispered out loud into the stillness, "I hope you come." The next morning was bright and calm. Lily arrived early, wearing her robe, her hair still pinned, makeup unfinished. From the church's bridal room window, she could see the street below, guests arriving, cars pulling in, her co-workers laughing as they found their seats. And then, she saw him standing near the steps, back straight, jacket pressed, hair neatly combed. It was the man from the alley, but not the man she remembered. He stood taller, looked stronger, and he was wearing a suit, faded but clean, his shoes polished, his chin lifted. He looked dignified. And that's when Lily heard it again, the whisper from the hallway, "Is that the homeless guy from behind her diner?" "No way," she invited him. "I mean, what's he even doing here?" The words were soft, but they hit hard. Lily felt her cheeks flush, her heartbeat thudded against her ribs. Her wedding planner stepped in, clipboard in hand, flustered. "Lily, we're 5 minutes out. Do you want me to ask him to wait somewhere else?" Lily didn't respond. She didn't think. She just moved, gathering the hem of her dress. She walked out of the bridal suite, past the shocked planner, down the hallway, and through the wide-open church doors. Guests turned, some stood, a few gasped, but Lily didn't care. She walked straight to him, and without saying a word, she reached for his hands and pulled him into a hug. The man's eyes closed just for a second, then opened, and for the first time in 6 years, he spoke, "I remember your eyes." Lily clung to his arms for a few seconds longer than she meant to. His suit smelled faintly of mothballs and soap. His shoulders trembled ever so slightly. She pulled back and looked up at him. His eyes, dark, calm, and heavy with miles, studied her face with something between awe and disbelief. "I never thought I'd be invited to a wedding again," he said softly. Lily laughed, a sound caught between joy and nerves. "I never thought you'd show up." He offered a small smile. "You showed up for me every morning. It was time I returned the favor." She reached for his arm instinctively, linking it with hers. And as they turned to walk together into the church, the whispers grew louder. More heads turned. Phones hovered midair. Then the sound came, low rumbling, not thunder, not traffic, powerful, unified engines. Outside the church, people turned toward the street as a black SUV convoy rolled up in quiet formation. Behind it, 12 motorcycles, matte black, shining chrome, military license plates, each rider wearing a full Marine Corps dress uniform. It was silent motion, precise, purposeful, choreographed without a word. Inside the church, the doors flew open. The music stopped. Gasps filled the space. 12 United States Marines in full formal uniform entered 2 by 2, walking down the aisle with the weight of ceremony in every step. Lily froze. Beside her, the man took a slow breath and stood straighter. They came, he whispered. The Marines stopped at the altar. One stepped forward, a captain, tall and steady, with silver at his temples and ribbons across his chest. He raised a white-gloved hand in a formal salute. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice loud and clear, "with your permission, we would like to honor you today." Lily blinked. "Me?" The captain turned, facing the guests. "This woman showed up every day for 6 years without recognition, without expectation, and sustained a Marine in silence." He turned back toward the man beside her. "A man many of us owe our lives to." The entire church fell still. The captain stepped aside and addressed the room. "This is Sergeant Daniel Reyes, awarded the Silver Star in 2004 after pulling 3 Marines from a burning vehicle under sniper fire in Fallujah, a soldier who never sought praise, who vanished from the system after losing his wife and daughter in a house fire in 2016, a man who never used his VA benefits, never returned calls, never asked for help." There were gasps in the pews. The man beside Lily, the one who sat silently behind her diner for years, had saved lives. He was a decorated war hero, and no one had known. One of the younger Marines stepped forward, carrying a wooden shadow box. Inside was a polished metal and a photograph, battered, faded, but powerful. It showed a younger Daniel carrying an unconscious soldier through rubble, his uniform soaked in blood, eyes locked forward. In the background of the photo, another Marine stood, the same captain now speaking. "He carried me," the captain said quietly. "When I thought I was done, he refused to leave me. He came back twice for others. That's what earned him the Silver Star, which he never claimed." He turned back to Lily. "Until you fed him, Ms. Harper, we thought he was gone." A pause. "Your small act, your sandwich and coffee, kept a warrior alive. Your napkins gave him a reason to wake up. You didn't just save him, you gave him back to us." Tears streamed down Lily's face. She couldn't speak. Behind her, the church was in stunned silence. The same guests who had whispered now looked down in shame. Even the wedding planner wept. Daniel reached into his pocket and handed Lily a folded note, thin, worn, clearly read many times. It was one of hers, "Stay warm out there, okay?" Signed only with a small heart. Then came the moment that no one expected. Captain Reyes turned to Aaron, the groom, who had quietly stepped forward. "Sir," he said, offering a salute, "with your permission, we would like to serve as honor guard for your bride, for her ceremony, and for her life." Aaron choked back emotion. He placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You can walk her down the aisle with me. You earned that right." As Lily stepped forward, flanked by her husband-to-be and a man who had once been forgotten by the world, 12 Marines turned in formation, heels clicking against the marble floor. They raised their swords in arch formation, a full ceremonial salute reserved for military weddings. Only this time, it wasn't for a soldier. It was for the woman who had fed one. The guests rose to their feet, not out of routine, but because they had to. No one told them to stand. No one instructed the pianist to resume. But the moment felt sacred as Lily walked between the raised swords, her gown grazing the floor. Time seemed to slow. Daniel walked beside her, his posture stiff but proud, tears clinging to his lashes. At the halfway point, he paused and gently placed her hand into Aaron's, then stepped back, silently taking position beside the Marines at the altar. He didn't want the spotlight. He just wanted her to know he remembered. The ceremony itself went by in a blur, vows spoken through misty eyes, rings exchanged with trembling hands. But no one forgot the moment the church doors had opened. No one forgot how wrong they had been. After the kiss, as the guests filed into the reception hall, there was a strange mix of excitement and humility in the air. People spoke in hushed tones, as if trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. One of Lily's bridesmaids, a bakery co-worker named Rachel, stood near the punch table, gripping a napkin. "I mocked her," she said to no one in particular. "I said she was wasting food. I didn't know." Another staff member, the same one who had posted the photo weeks earlier, stood nearby, visibly shaken. "She never once mentioned it, not once, and we made fun of her behind her back." She began to cry. The wedding planner, clipboard forgotten on a nearby table, approached Lily quietly. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice raw. "I saw a man in worn shoes and made assumptions. I thought you were making a mistake, but you were reminding him he mattered. That's the opposite of a mistake." Lily smiled through her tears. "He reminded me, too." Daniel sat in a chair by the wall, quietly sipping punch. Several guests, one by one, approached him, not for questions, not for praise, just to say thank you. One man knelt in front of him. "My son was in Fallujah," he whispered. "I don't know if you saved him, but someone like you did. Thank you." Daniel nodded, emotion caught in his throat. Later in the evening, after the dancing had begun, Lily noticed something unexpected. The Marines didn't leave. They weren't there for formality. They weren't there for photo ops. They stayed. They laughed. They helped clear tables. One even held a crying baby so the bride's sister could eat. Another offered to drive an elderly guest home. They weren't guests anymore, they were family. Before the night ended, Captain Duncan asked to say a few words. He stood beside Daniel, microphone in hand, and addressed the room. "There's a saying in the Corps," he began. "You don't leave your own behind." He paused. "What we often forget is that sometimes our own get left behind right here in alleys, in silence, in pain, not because we want to forget them, but because it's easier to look away." He turned to Lily. But this woman never looked away. The room fell still. She didn't know his past, didn't care about his record. She saw him. She gave him warmth, consistency, and dignity. That's a kind of heroism you don't train for. Applause didn't erupt. No one clapped right away. They just stood there, heads bowed, eyes full, because no applause could match what they felt. As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Daniel walked over to Lily and Aaron once more. "I have nothing to give you," he said, "except the one thing I never thought I'd use again." He reached into his coat pocket and handed Lily a folded American flag, the kind presented at military funerals. "This was meant for me," he said, "but I wanted to live with you, in the hands of someone who understood what service really means." Lily held the flag like a sacred object. "We'll build something with this," she whispered, and she meant it. They returned from their honeymoon 2 weeks later, sun-kissed, grateful, and quietly changed. Something about the wedding had shifted Lily and Aaron's hearts, not just because they were now husband and wife, but because they'd seen what one small act of kindness could do. 12 Marines had walked into their wedding uninvited, but not unwelcome. They didn't come for cake, they came for truth. And that truth was now impossible to ignore. The week after they returned, Lily walked back into Harper's diner. Everything looked the same, the creaking floorboards, the chipped coffee mugs, the scent of hash browns and butter in the air. But it didn't feel the same anymore. She stood behind the counter, eyes scanning the crowd. Regulars chatted, plates clattered, laughter floated through the air. But something, or rather someone, was missing. Daniel never came back. She checked the alley that first morning, nothing, no note, no cup, no him. At first, she worried. But then, like a sunrise pushing away a storm, she realized he didn't need to be there anymore. He had found his way back. That night, she sat across from Aaron on their porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. "I want to do something with this," she said, holding the neatly folded flag Daniel had given her. "Something that lasts." Aaron didn't need to ask what she meant, he already knew. 2 weeks later, the first pot of coffee was poured at what would come to be known as the Quiet Table. It wasn't a nonprofit, it wasn't a registered organization, it wasn't on Yelp, there were no hashtags, no press release, just a folding table in the alley behind Harper's diner, the very same spot where Daniel used to sit. On the table sat a wooden sign carved by Aaron himself, "The Quiet Table, for veterans, no questions asked." No IDs, no paperwork, no explanations, just hot coffee, warm food, and a place to be seen. At first, only 2 people came, then 6. By the 3rd week, a Marine in civilian clothes showed up, holding a box of fresh socks and handing them out quietly. The next day, another dropped off coats. By the end of the month, veterans from across the county started stopping by, some for food, others just for the silence, for a moment of dignity. And every day, Lily was there. She'd wake up at 4 a.m., make sandwiches, and lay out coffee cups, each one with a handwritten note on the sleeve, notes like, "You matter, don't forget." Still standing, that counts today. We don't need to know your name to honor your story. Then, on the first anniversary of her wedding, Lily arrived early with Aaron, only to find 12 Marines already waiting in the alley. This time, no uniforms, just street clothes, each holding a single white flower. Captain Duncan stepped forward and placed his flower at the table's center. "We've come to take shifts." Lily looked at him, confused. He smiled. "It shouldn't just be yours to carry, this isn't a one-woman mission." And from that moment on, the quiet table became a rotation. Veterans, firemen, teachers, nurses, and retirees signed up for shifts. Some brought food, others brought stories, but no one brought judgment. Victor, or rather Daniel, never returned in person. But every month, Lily received a postcard, always from a different city, always in the same shaky but determined handwriting. "Every breakfast is a salute, Daniel." Sometimes the card showed a mountain, sometimes a train station. Once, it was the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C. She kept every one, framed them on the diner's back wall just above the doorway to the alley. One afternoon, a local news crew showed up. Word had spread quietly, like everything else Lily had done. They asked for an interview, a photo. She smiled politely and pointed to the line of men waiting for coffee behind her. "Talk to them," she said, "I'm just the one pouring." Inside the diner, someone once asked Aaron how he felt marrying into all this, the constant giving, the early mornings, the freezer full of donated leftovers. He grinned. "I didn't just marry a woman," he said, "I married a legacy." Later that year, a teenage boy showed up at the quiet table with a backpack and a notepad. He didn't ask for food, he just asked, "Can I sit here?" Lily nodded. He stayed all day, writing. That night, he handed her a folded piece of paper. It was a poem about his grandfather, a Marine lost to suicide 3 years prior. No one had ever let him talk about it until now. That night, as Lily closed the diner and walked past the table, she paused. It wasn't just a table anymore, it was a lifeline, a memory, a thank you, a place where stories returned home. Lily stood behind the quiet table one fall morning, steam curling from a row of fresh coffee cups. The alley was quiet. The leaves had started to fall. The air smelled like cinnamon, diesel, and autumn dust. It had been nearly 2 years since her wedding, since 12 Marines walked into her life with nothing but silence and salute. Now, the table was rarely empty. Some mornings, she would find a folded drawing from a child. Other days, a vet would leave behind a trinket, a patch, a coin, a crumpled photograph with initials scribbled on the back. None of it was ever taken, it was left like offerings of memory. And above the table, Daniel's original note still hung in its frame, "Thank you for seeing me." Next to it, Lily had placed her own reply, "Everyone who sits here has a story worth knowing." The town changed, too. The same people who had whispered at her wedding now stopped by the diner just to ask, "Do you need more coffee cups? Can I donate gloves? Would it be okay if I just sat and listened?" And that was the most beautiful part, not the flags, not the uniforms, not the headlines that came later, but the fact that kindness, quiet, inconvenient, unpaid kindness, had changed something. It had reminded a small town what dignity looked like, what service really meant, and what happens when you choose to see people instead of passing them by. Lily never saw Daniel in person again. But every month, without fail, his postcards came. One final one arrived in winter, the handwriting slower, more strained. "I found a home, it's small, but mine. The coffee here is awful, but I think of yours often. I kept the scarf, still wear it when the wind cuts too hard. You saved me without ever asking who I was. Thank you for seeing me and for giving me a reason to come back." Lily framed that last postcard, hung it above the register, and when people ask what the quiet table is for, she doesn't give speeches, she just points to that frame and says, "Sometimes the greatest heroes eat alone unless someone brings them breakfast." So, if you've ever passed someone on the street, if you've ever hesitated because you weren't sure what to say, if you've ever wondered whether a small act of kindness even matters, let this story be your answer. Kindness doesn't need applause, it needs consistency. And dignity doesn't need a uniform, it needs someone who sees it, Because you never know who's sitting behind the diner or who might walk into your life in full uniform at just the right time. If this story reminded you of someone who gave quietly without ever asking for thanks, tell us about them below, or just type respect if you believe kindness still matters. And if you want more stories that honor those the world often forgets, hit subscribe. We see them, and we'll keep telling their stories on Graceful Valor Stories.